Among this year's Ramon Magsaysay Awardees is a Filipina recognized for her work in helping more women take part in the conversation on peace building. We learn about Miriam Coronel-Ferrer's journey as a peace negotiator here on The Final Word. Ma'am, good evening and welcome to the program.
Good evening, Menchu.
Ma'am, first off, congratulations. How does it feel receiving this distinction?
Of course, very honored to join the ranks of the awardees over the last 65 years. It's been a good collection from all over Asia, and it's a privilege to be part of this group.
Well, let's go back a little bit. Could you tell us briefly how your engagement in political issues began and how and why did you get into peace negotiation?
My peace advocacy started right after the EDSA revolution way back in 1986, when I realized that the armed conflicts that were besetting our country at that time, until now, to a certain extent, with regard to the Communist Party of the Philippines New People's Army, needed to be solved in a more civil way through political negotiations, and that's how I started to follow through this kind of track, both in terms of my activism as well as in my academic work at the University of the Philippines.
Well, through the years, you've been recognized for your involvement in the country's first National Action Plan on Women, Peace and Security, as well as the comprehensive agreement on the Bangsamoro signed by the government and the Moro Islamic Liberation Front. How do you handle such complex and sensitive issues?
I do it with a lot of help from friends and colleagues who journey together. We journey together toward this track. You know, you can't, this is a project that requires wide consensus, and sometimes you don't get that. Not everybody agrees that you can find a peaceful way out of all the troubles that beset our country. And so that's part of it. Being able to work with others, like-minded people, both from civil society and government, and also from around the world, to bring home that message that there's a way out, a less violent way out of the many conflicts in society.
So why do you think you were successful? Because there were so many negotiations over the years.
Yes. You mean in terms of the negotiations?
Why do you think you were successful?
Front, right?
Yes.
There are a lot of factors that converged to make that possible. We know that that was a process that took 17 years in the making. Way back in 1997, when President Ramos initiated the process with the MILF and was able to forge a ceasefire agreement. But the substantive agreement on the real political solutions that would solve the problem really took a long time. And it needed a fresh start under the late President Simeon Benigno Aquino III, who was really committed to this process and brought the whole government into this track. I think he really invested his political capital to be able to see this through. And then, of course, we had to find creative solutions to the many issues that the negotiations demanded. These were not easy because we had to make sure that there will be no constitutional challenge to the agreement.
Well, you've also championed the women's role in peace building. So what do you believe is the primary role and advantage of women in the pursuit of peace in our world?
First of all, of course, men and women can do the job, but it begs the question, why have few women been involved in such high-level negotiations? And we know that this is a structural issue. Some of it also has cultural issues where women are not deemed, are mostly relegated out of the public space. But at the same time, we know that women, because precisely of the way they are socialized in the roles in the community, have always been very concerned about the security, human security, as well as basic physical security in their community. So that's what they bring to the table. They bring that kind of perspective based on their lived experience. And if it's not articulated on the table, then it doesn't get into the agreement.
All right. Well, many women still experience, discrimination, harassment, and violence across the world, despite efforts to really empower them. What should the Philippines and other countries do to better protect women?
We're considered an outlier in that sense. The fact, for example, that 3 out of the 6 government signatories to the agreement were women, and that's really rare to get that kind of 50%. And the fact that there have been women all the time actually part of the negotiating process. And it's very helpful, of course, that we have a women in peace movement who accompany all of this process. And that's our message to the rest of the world. It's about the role that we played, but it's also about the kind of process and all the mechanisms and modalities that we were able to draw up. And I think we're sharing that lesson well to the rest of the world. Those who are still grappling, for example, with how do you do a ceasefire? How can you make it work? We have had very good experience with our ceasefire between the government and the more Islamic Liberation Front, and many countries have learned from that. What do you do with the weapons and the combatants? We learned from other countries who've had earlier peace agreements, and now we're telling also those who are still addressing these problems how it may be done. Mm-hmm. What kind of political solution can be possible? For example, in other countries, having autonomous governments are simply no, it's taboo. Mm-hmm. In a very centralized authoritarian regime, for example, coming to terms with a special arrangement with a unique constituency that is part of your country is certainly simply not imaginable.
There's a lot of nuances to it, but technologies such as artificial intelligence have also developed rapidly, especially amid the COVID-19 pandemic. How can these innovations empower women more and promote peace?
Technology is a tool, so it has its good side and it has its bad side. The good side, of course, is that it's easy to convene, but as I've heard from some women, if you don't have the password, you're shut out from the conversation that's going on online. And that's a little bit different if, say, a meeting is going on in a hotel or a conference room, and women can just stay outside and do their manifestations and still be outside the room. But in a Zoom meeting, for example, if you don't have the password, you don't get in. Mm-hmm. So it's that kind of advantage and disadvantage. It's very useful. For example, ICT has been very useful in really strengthening communication between the government and the armed groups during a ceasefire crisis, for example. That really helps in being able to enable very quick reaction to be able to stop the hostility.
All right. Thank you very much, Ramon Magsaysay Awardee Miriam Coronel-Ferrer, and congratulations once again.